Computer audio. Alrighty. Today's first Zoom book study, so this will be exciting.
Yeah, I guess I didn't realize. So there's actually books already published about George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, this is actually written by SMS Novels founder and creator Jomo Kenyatta Johnson. So
Oh, wow.
it's pretty like close local type book. So we'll actually be able to speak to the author later this evening at 8:30. So that'll be a fun little gathering, I think.
Oh, okay. Right on.
But how
I
are
just
you?
I gotta
Sorry.
turn my camera off just because the Zoom messes up my camera sometimes. But just thought
That's
I'd say
perfect.
hello.
That's perfect. Thank you. That is perfect. And just make sure we have everyone. Alrighty. And you guys can either have your cameras on or just the photo would be awesome, just so we can kind of have an understanding or idea of who we're referring to when we do engage. Hopefully everyone is doing well this evening or whatever time it is where you're located. I'm located on the East Coast, so in Maryland, and yeah, hanging in there today. So if anybody has any just thought processes on what's been going on recently, just getting comfortable, I'm all for hearing it all. But if you just need a break before we get started, that's cool too. I hope everyone got the chance to read the sections for today as well. But if not, hopefully just throughout the Q&A, we can get a little context going, and just any personal insight is totally welcome. So yeah. Everything all right over there? We're just gonna give like the next few moments, about 2 to 4 minutes, just so if any last folk wanna be coming in and joining us for this meeting, then they have time to do so. But around the 8:07 mark for me, we will be locking the meeting so we can make sure this goes smoothly and undisturbed by just any random folk that we don't want to disturb the meeting. So that'll be cool. Hello, nice to meet you. Oh, your mic is muted, but yeah, I would love to. Oh, you can turn it on when we get to the Q&A and everything. That's perfect. Yeah, no problem. That's perfect. Alrighty, guys, we're going to begin in about a minute or so and lock up the meeting in about a few minutes as well. So, because we do have a limited amount of time, so we do want to make sure we have a adequate amount of time to really get into these questions and this conversation. And yeah, I'm very excited to be you guys' host as well. So this will be awesome. Mm-mm-mm. Alrighty, I think I will get started. I do want to give you guys a disclaimer. If you've already read some of the work, you know that this book does cover various topics regarding religion, death, and other sensitive topics in regards to racial justice, race relations, and whatnot. So we do ask that everyone join in on the conversation with civility and respect to each other's and for each other's ideas and beliefs. But going forward, I do want to introduce myself as London Watkins, and I will be the host of this series of Zoom book studies lasting 4 weeks. And we will be reading He Changed the World, a theological novel inspired by the life of George Floyd, written by SMS Novel's very own Jomo Kenyatta Johnson. So this will be a really special piece of work for us to cover, thankfully. So going forward, I do want to say that the murder of George Floyd at the hands of police brutality on May 25th, 2020 has been a driving force in the creation of this Zoom book study with the primary goal of having facilitated discussion in regards to racial justice and race relations going on right now. So each week we will review select chapters of the book, and meetings are 8 p.m. on Monday, 8 p.m. on Wednesdays, and 12 noon on Saturdays, Eastern Standard Time. And all of the meetings are 30 minutes long. And on Mondays, we will be having a podcast interview with the author at 8:30 p.m. So please feel welcome to join one or all of the meetings. But just a reminder that we will be reviewing the same chapters for each meeting in 1 week. So come whenever you feel like it, but we're welcoming you with open arms. I just want to say that today we will be beginning with reading the first 2 pages of the book, followed by a Q&A, and lastly, some final comments. And please feel free to introduce yourself before speaking, and please mute yourself when you're not talking. So going into the reading, I'm going to start from the prologue and end at the end of Crossroads section. And if you guys have your reading up, that would be awesome. So if you would like to read along, but I can definitely do my part on this side. All right, so prologue. Dear Lord, he began to pray. His words were audible only to his own mind. He recalled the prayer that his grandmother had taught him when he was a little boy. I shall not fear no man but God, though I walk through the valley of death. If I should die before I wake, please God, walk with me, take me to heaven. He continued to repeat the prayer as his spirit was slowly severed from his body before speaking his last words as the life was choked out of his crushed neck. Mama. The fear of the unknown began to insulate him. People usually say that your whole life flashed before your eyes at death, but not for George. The only thing he could think was the curiosity of what was next. He had been afraid before in his life, but the fear that was now engulfing him was becoming unbearable. Oh God, he cried out. In the anguish of his mind was when he saw the young girl. The fear had caused him to be oblivious to what was going on around him on the sidewalk. His killer was still there, but now there was also someone else. The girl walked towards him. It was Latasha Harlins. She was the beautiful 15-year-old girl that was killed by the Los Angeles Korean convenience store owner in 1991. Her death had made national headlines concerning racism and violence towards unarmed Blacks. George himself, being a frequent victim of racial profiling, had once watched the story of her murder on the internet. Latasha appeared a few years older, but her youth and beauty remained. She wore a white, full-flowing gown that draped over her shoulders and reached to the pavement. Her dress was whiter than anything he had seen. The glow from the appearance of the dress seemed to brighten the already well-lit street. Apart from the glow of her dress, it was the appearance of Latasha that captivated him. Her long braided ebony locks flowing down to her waist, her beautiful brown skin was flawless, and her eyes were a piercing hazel that seemed to penetrate his soul. She was more than gorgeous. She was immaculate. He wanted to speak, but Latasha's beauty left him without words. Latasha remained silent, but her eyes communicated to George perfectly. She knelt down to him and looked at him, beckoning him. "Follow me," her eyes spoke to him. It was then that George knew that he could leave his body. He allowed himself to succumb to the rising sensation that he had felt earlier. He pushed himself up and saw that he was ascending out of his body. He felt much lighter as he took his first steps post-mortem. He looked at his spirit and saw that the blood that had been flowing from his body had stopped. The broken bones and skin had been healed from his neck. The bruises on his head where his murderer had placed his knee were also gone. Latasha spoke without words. He could hear her in his mind again. "Follow me." He stood to his feet and looked into Latasha's eyes. He was enamored. Latasha, knowing that George was fixating on her appearance, she began to turn around. She knew her beauty was only a reflection of a greater beauty and did not want George to worship her. She too was a victim. Crossroads. As George began to follow her drawn almost involuntarily, he stopped as he saw the back of her head. The sight of Latasha had changed when she turned around. The back of her head, which from George's earlier view was filled with beautiful flowing locks, now was much different. The back of Latasha's head still had the wound from the gunshot that would take her life years ago. It was visible and seemed to have not healed. When a drop of blood fell from her wound onto her brilliant white gown, George's spirit became incapacitated. The realization of his own death began to set in, which caused him serious grief. It was as if now that the feeling of her was reminding him of his own murder. He collapsed to his knees as he began to cry, uncontrollably upon seeing the blood of the little girl. It was as if he was experiencing her death in his own spirit. Latasha turned back around. She walked to George and placed her hand on his back. It was the first touch he could remember feeling since the struggle with his killer commenced. Her touch lifted his spirits. She then took her hand and touched his chest. "George," she spoke in a voice that was soft and sweet. Her voice resonated through his ears. "George," she replied again. He looked up to the young girl, humbled by her beauty, but gripped by the thought of death. "George," she spoke again. He remembered when his mother told him about why she named him George. The name came from the name Travis, but his mother joked that she thought the name sounded too white. The name Travis meant crossroads. His mother told him that she always believed that George's life would be so impactful that it would serve as some type of crossroads or bridge for people. She had the belief that a mother's naming of a child attached a special sense of divine destiny to the child. It was as if the memory of his mother was now speaking through Latasha. "Just as you were named," Latasha spoke, "your life and death will be a crossroads for many people. Do you believe this?" And that is the conclusion of the reading I will get through today. And now we will go on to the Q&A. And please feel welcome to just unmute your mic and speak. And if there's anyone who I feel like I would like to include more, I'll definitely point folks out, and just to give everyone a fair chance to say their part. But the first question that I would like to bring up after this reading for today is, the author makes an definitive statement about his belief in not only life after death, but how our deaths can affect the lives of others. So in what ways do you observe the horrific death of George Floyd having a potential eternal impact even beyond this generation? And please feel welcome to take your time to think of your answer or your own feelings and insight towards this question. And I can also put it in the chat just in case you need to see it one more time.
I have an idea.
Oh,
Um,
please.
I am hoping that, I mean, there's been way too many deaths like this, and I really hope that this is the final impetus for change. I mean, people have been agitating for this for so long, and I feel like it's almost frustrating, I'm sure, for people of color, it's even more because you actually experience it, but just to see it happening over and over, and we talk about it, but nothing gets done. I really, truly hope. This was a very moving thing. It brought me to tears when I read it. It reminded me of the crucifixion of Jesus. So, and I feel like that's a lot what this is about. I mean, it's about how do we treat people? Do we, is this acceptable to ever treat someone like this? I don't care if they're guilty of any crime, and he wasn't, but that's not how you treat people. And it's so horrific. So I really hope that it brings about change. I'm doing everything I can to advocate and learn, but I really hope this is the change, and nationwide, not just city by city, but actually, it needs to become a national policy.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your commentary, Laura. That's awesome. If anybody else have any thoughts behind that, they'll be greatly appreciated and totally welcome. Take your time. Or if Laura, if you would like to expand even more, but everyone, please feel welcome and comfortable to give your input. Tolly or Peter, if you two have any insight or any comments.
Yeah, sure. I can. Hi, my name is Peter. I'm in San Francisco.
Awesome.
And it's funny. I was watching a pretty powerful documentary last night on. It's called. I don't know if you're all familiar with the late author James Baldwin.
Yes.
Incredibly articulate,
Yes.
and just powerful person. There's a great documentary on I don't know if it was Netflix or Amazon, but it's called I Am Not Your Negro. It's incredible. I mean, it's like watching that, and we're talking mid to late 60s when, he's meeting with Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers. And they're talking like, if you turned that horrific video that we all watched of George Floyd into black and white, you would think you were watching like civil rights, era again. I mean, it's just amazing that this has been going on this long. And I think, to answer your question, and I'm sorry, TS, what do you go by, TS, or do you have a?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I did not switch my name before this. Sorry about that. My name is London, and there you are.
Yeah, so I think to answer, you put out a good question, will this potential, eternal impact even beyond our generation? I mean, this is the first time I've been aware that the protests were not just around the country, but around in other countries for George Floyd. And I thought that was pretty powerful. And it's also a wake-up call for racism of different kinds around the globe. But I mean, the fact that, I think Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, there was a pretty powerful photo of her in the Capitol, like after, she literally, her and a couple of her aides they literally just took a knee in the middle of the Capitol inside the lobby for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I mean, at least I know there's controversy around should the police be defunded? Should they have as much power as they should? Not even getting into like the pros and cons of defunding police and this and that. I think what's powerful enough is that those conversations are happening, and they weren't happening before. So this one is different. It was just such a grotesque, abuse of power. And I mean, what's more like maddening than that, though, is that you see, you see like at other protests sparked by George Floyd, police brutality continuing. So, I mean, at least the world is watching, and I guess that's the greatest thing about our technology is that we do have capability to capture police now that we didn't before. So I would say yes. I think this is definitely going to set a precedent moving forward, and it's just so tragic that it had to take yet another innocent life to do it, but this one does feel different. And my gut says I don't think this will wear off in the next few months, or hopefully not even the next few years. I think these conversations, again, people are arguing pro, against defunding police, not defunding police, but again, I think the very fact that we're having these conversations cannot be overlooked.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And thank you too for your commentary on that first question. We are going to move on because we do have a limited amount of time. But just going further into the book, the author introduces Latasha Harlins as a guardian angel type. The author could have selected from a litany of slain Black children from slavery to the civil rights movement, such as the Birmingham church bombing that killed the 4 little Black girls in the 1960s. But what do you believe the significance of the author choosing Latasha means?
Can you repeat or can you put the question in the chat room, please?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Thank you. My sound's not too great here.
No problem. Let me just get that out to y'all. That's just the basis of the question, but in comparison to the many Black children who were subjected to the horrible realities of racial injustices, why do you feel like the author chose Latasha Harlins to be George Floyd's guardian angel to bridge that gap between the world and the afterlife?
I read about her murder, and it appears that there was a connection as well for her to a convenience store. And she was also killed by, it was just completely unfair and unwarranted. And I believe that the person who shot her got like a slap on the hand. There was like no justice.
Yeah. I too have read that was the case, and just the whole circumstances behind that situation, and not getting the justice in the end, which is not something that we're unfamiliar with, unfortunately. But if anyone else has any thoughts, please feel welcome to speak and give your commentary.
And not to dominate the conversation, but I read that it also was recorded, which I think it was in 1991, was kind of a more unusual thing because people didn't have cell phones. It was just like a security camera.
That's true. It's a lot less accessible back then compared to now, where everyone, for the most part, has a cell phone monitoring everything at all times. So,
right.
That's a great point that you made, Laura.
Thank you.
And so, just to be clear, Latasha, she was killed by the convenience store owner?
Yes. During her...
That's a good question. I really don't know, considering that George Floyd was killed by a policeman. That is an interesting, juxtaposition, I guess.
What do you think this... by George Floyd being killed by the police and Latasha being killed by a convenience store owner, what do you feel like it kind of tells us about what forms racial injustice comes in, and what does it look like? What do you feel like it, what type of insight does that give you? Just like your observation that it's a juxtaposition is part of a great, I think, observation, actually.
Well, to me, it says that it doesn't matter if it's a police officer or a store owner or a neighbor protecting their property. People of color have targets on their back. I mean, it really, just being Black can be dangerous if you're, to a white person, which is terrible. It's tragic. It just seems like it doesn't matter. There's always going to be somebody doing the violence to them, and it's wrong.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your additions. All right, y'all, we can move on to the next question. How does your view of death affect how you approach, confront, or challenge racism in your own communities? And I can put that in the chat as well, so you guys can go at your own pace. I'm not sure if Toli, if you had any comments or commentary or whatnot to add, please feel welcome to. Oh, well, I can actually, I'm so sorry. I can actually get started on that one and then add you in if you don't mind. And just give you like a little bit of my own understanding as to how I approach it myself. I think one of my biggest affinities towards is just communication and the different layers of ways that we can communicate with one another, and making sure I'm having these conversations consistently with the people I surround myself with in my interpersonal relationships, and even in the organizational settings that I choose to stay in and engage in and be a part of. I do want to make sure they're being mindful of things regarding this nature, things that are important, things that do come up, because so often when we don't talk about stuff, it it completely erases that reality. And if you don't believe that reality exists, then you don't believe that those problems exist with it either. So just making sure to have those conversations has been my main and primary way of doing my part, besides other forms of activism. But please feel welcome, Totally, to have a couple points on your own, because we would love to hear a new voice as well. And so, well, all voices.
Sure. Well, this is not so much a view on death itself, but sort of a view on what reality, what life is in general. I have recently started deeply adopting this belief that we're all one. That we're actually just one consciousness divided into many parts. And essentially, we're just observing ourselves or interacting with ourselves in many different ways. And really understanding this concept, which took many, many years. I guess I first heard of this concept maybe 10 years ago when I first took psychedelics. But it took me 10 years to really understand what it means. And yeah, I suppose it's really come into the picture in terms of realizing that we are responsible for other people's lives and happiness. And it's difficult to judge somebody's actions without realizing that it's just a reflection of your own.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Was a great way to kind of wrap this up, because we are out of here in just a couple minutes. I do want to say thank you all for coming out and having your points. And last but not least, I do want to finish up by saying that I think that the beginning of this reading definitely exposed us to like the tangible realities of racial injustices and its effects on Black people for sure. Harlan's and Floyd, 30 years apart, different genders, 1991 to 2020, different perpetrators, but ultimately the same enemy, which is racism, in the prejudice form, in the discriminatory form, and ultimately the systematic form that we see so clearly. And just yesterday on July 5th has marked the 4-year anniversary of the slaying of Alton Sterling by officers for selling CDs. And to this day, no one has been prosecuted for his death. So this is just evident that we live in a society that has seen the effects of ignorance time and time again, and unfortunately have become complicit with it. So this is why we need to continue to have these conversations that we're having like today and validate the experiences of the marginalized and continue forward with this. I think this is a great start and can only expand from here. But all right, everyone, I do want to say that this does conclude today's Zoom meeting. A reminder that we do meet Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays. And anyone interested can stay as well, have the author join us from 8:30 to 9 p.m. But thank you all so much, regardless of what you choose to do in the next 30 minutes, for joining us. And make sure to check out the podcast for more information on the topic and the book. But thank you, everyone. But we will be having our special author here, Jomo Kenyatta Johnson, in just one moment, whenever he's ready to join us. Oh, I'm sorry. You guys actually can take a 2-minute break in between, so you guys can, like, drink some water, mute yourself, talk to whomever, and he'll be right out, and we can get that interview nice and started and see what insight that he has to bring to the table as well. So that'll be awesome.
Hey, while we're waiting, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure. The whole floor?
I suppose. So recently I started writing this article, which I guess is turning more into a book by its length, about my experience through the whole Black Lives Matter movement. And I'm choosing to take a fairly unconventional approach and really explaining a lot of the psychology and going into some uncomfortable truths behind the movement. I want to make sure that this is an effective piece of writing, but I also want to minimize triggering people and offending people. Would you guys be open to collaborating on reviewing my writing and seeing how I can better deliver my message?
That would be awesome. I can definitely speak for myself first, and like I would love to look over it. I know that it is a sensitive topic, and yeah, it does need to be written and presented delicately, but also, keeping it real 100%, and finding that good balance between being mindful of other people's perceptions of it, but also making sure you are authentic about your own expression. So that'll be awesome to be able to review and look over for you for sure.
Thanks so much.
Hi, sweetie. Hi, sweetie.
Oh,
good girl.
Oh, that's not working. Oh.
I'm like, oh, that's so cool.
I'm like in eternity in the book. Let me see if I can turn that off. I'm sorry about that. That's kind of scary if you think about it.
Yeah, I was like, I guess that's the look for today. Like,
no, it's not. Woo. I apologize, everybody. Everybody, is good to meet you. How about we just do audio until I figure this out? We'll get started. How about that, London?
That's perfect. That's perfect. We are just going to give a warm welcome to you as the author of He Changed the World, and just say thank you again for joining us today. And how are you, first and foremost?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I'm in Baltimore, Maryland now, and we are preparing at SMS.
You want to come here?
In Baltimore, and we're going to Savannah to shoot a documentary inspired by George Floyd. So preparing for that. So I'm doing well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We do have a limited amount of time, so we are going to hop right into these questions. First and foremost, off the top of my head, I do want to ask you, as the founder of Black Lives Matter Savannah, how do you think this position has impacted your creation of this book and your personal connection to its contents?
Man, that's deep. I think working with Black Lives Matter and social justice as a Black male, it showed me the good, but it's also shown me how far we need to go. And it showed me that I hate to be somewhat pessimistic, but we probably never will get to perfection in this life.
Yeah.
concerning racial justice. So if we don't get to perfection, where could it be found? And logically, the only place it could be found is in eternity. And so this was kind of just an imagination of what racial justice might look like in the initial stages of eternity.
Thank you very much for your answer for that. Going forward, why did you choose to write about George Floyd as opposed to the others who have been subjected to racial injustices? Similar to the question we had earlier in today's meeting, but your personal insight.
Well, I try to write what is, what I'm passionate about, what I feel like people need to hear, and also what's relevant. So I've written on social justice figures before, but this one I thought, because of the impact of his death, could show that maybe there's something bigger than life that's happening here. And if it's bigger than life, then maybe we should look at that and consider how that actually might be the solution for our problems. A lot of philosophy here, but ultimately, philosophy is the thing that leads to change. When you have a change of thought, you have a change of action. And so I thought the best way to introduce a philosophy was through a theology, through a story, not a doctrine, not you need to do ABC, but here's a story, do what you want with it. Yeah.
That's awesome. And it gives people
imagination.
Imagination. To interpret it the way they see. And also all the visuals, honestly, while reading it so far, the visuals are very just in your face, which is awesome. And just something that stood out to me while reading it myself. But another point that totally actually mentioned is that just kind of this not new idea necessarily, but I think also closely linked to religion and just different faith beliefs, that we are all connected, we are all one. And what do you feel about that kind of belief and idea, and how could we apply that kind of oneness to a situation where there is a specific kind of marginalized group that which can kind of be discounted by the oneness idea?
Right. So I wrote a philosophy manifesto, 2009. I think it's called The Philosophy of Life. And I wrote in that book, I said the one thing that all human beings have in common, regardless of age, race, demographic, location, one thing we have all in common, we all suffer. We all suffer. We all go through pain. Not everybody is happy, but we all suffer something. That's the one link. And just like that old saying, a chain is only strong as its weakest link, the suffering of one will affect the suffering of all. And so basically, if we're able to treat the least of these with the honor and respect that they're due, it actually heals us, a country, a community, a nation, a family. And so the question is, can we do it? And then if we can do it, next question is how? And so again, I hope that the imagination will kind of get us thinking of how we can do things in ways maybe we've never imagined before.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that little bit of insight and kind of bridge between the two, ideas. But as a person with experience in activism and writing, what would you consider potential solutions or stepping stones in the fight for racial justice?
That's a very difficult question. And
please answer
I have to be careful because I'm a business owner and people will hear this stuff, but I feel like, hey, so I think there's two options. Number one, I think it's like Laura, I think you mentioned earlier, just being willing to learn and listen. But then I think also there's going to come a time where there's going to be a need for radical action. I'm not the one to tell you what that looks like, but it's going to cost you something. And so I think when the time comes, you just kind of have to be ready and prepared for it. But again, while we're kind of at a quiet time, is to learn, is to listen, is to have conversations like this, is to do what you can. Fill your day with good works if possible. But again, there may come a time when you're forced to make a real drastic decision and you have to be willing to make that decision.
Yeah. So how do you, not to get too far into it, but I think just how you answered just brings it back to how different acts like the Civil Rights Act and just different movements had to have layers of reform, layers of change that happen. And, not all of them are necessarily viewed from the outside perspective as being productive, as proactive. But I think, as we can see, a lot of radicalism has caused a lot of change and is the reason for a lot of the privileges that we have today, because someone said enough is enough. But going forward, what other works, if any, inspired the creation of He Changed the World?
To be honest, I have to say a hope that the day will come that we don't have to march anymore, that racial justice will come to earth and everybody will be everybody's neighbor. And I have that hope is going to happen. Now, I don't know how it's going to happen exactly. I don't know when it's going to happen exactly, but I have a firm hope it's going to happen. And so to be able to persevere until that day, and what is interesting is that that day might even be beyond the grave. But to persevere, to work for it, to look for it, to lust after it, and then if it does happen, just to enjoy it. And so my hope is to do all we can, whether it's writing, whether it's taking care of kids. Everybody has their own calling, but I think having hope and working toward that hope is what makes character go along with that calling as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, just combining like your own true calling and making sure everyone else is looking out for their own calling as well. But that would be awesome. Going forward from there, have you still personally been seeing a lot of attention still geared towards George Floyd's death, put into media, social media and whatnot? And because personally, I've seen like a slow up on it. And how do you feel like we can re-engage with this narrative? And, you know, because so easily we see something, we have the outcry, and then we kind of sway
Well,
away.
I think, you know, artists have a great responsibility. Those who write, those who paint, those who do movies, to tell stories. And it's not necessarily the story of George Floyd. We know his story. But to tell the story of others who have been affected by his story. So I think being able to tell those stories, to be able to create art, being able to tell your kids, you know, this is why this is important. You know, I had the idea a few years ago about even thinking about having some of these martyrs listed as martyrs of a movement. But I think being able to do whatever you can. But for me, it's been about being able to use writing and being able to use media and to try to tell the stories of people like yourselves who are experiencing those things, because ultimately it'll be the impact that you experience that'll influence your child or your husband or your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever. And that'll be kind of a good thing that happens. So I think if we can inspire 1 to 2 people in our own little inner circle, we've done a lot.
Yeah, done your part, for real. That's awesome to hear. Like, and just, I think it really even highlights the point that we were making earlier, just the impact of life while living and the impact after, you know, we leave from this lifetime. And yeah, that just kind of reinforces that whole idea that, you know, it doesn't have to be a whole bunch of people that you are, you know, impacted.
That's
just
right.
one is enough.
That's right.
And even if that person is yourself, so that'd be
Absolutely.
So regardless of readers' interpretations, what do you want to make sure is expressed through the book?
I just hope you all can get through, I believe it's chapters 5 and 6, where it's that list of names. I hope you all can get through that. Most people can't get through that. But just reading it and just interpreting for yourself, you know, as an artist, I should never tell anybody how to interpret art. But the hope is that you see yourself in it some way, somehow. And if you can see yourself in that story, I think I've done my job.
Yeah, that's awesome. And tying that right back into the whole connectedness between all of us. That'd be awesome. Do you have any more upcoming novels with the same subject matter regarding like social justice and reform?
Nope, not at all. I'm done.
How was this process for like while going through this process? Sorry, how was it going through this process?
Well, I have a lot of writings that I haven't really used, but I'm always touched by something, and so if I get touched by something, I may revisit something and say maybe I can do this with it. And so it's not the writing that's the difficult thing. It's the time that it takes to write. That's the challenge. But yeah, this one was good, and I was glad to get it done.
Yes, amazing. Thank you so much for getting it done when you did. And like, about how long actually did this like take you? Because
about 3 years. About 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah, altogether about 3 years.
Wow, that's dedication. Thank you so much for getting it out to us. Do you have any suggestions for future activists, writers, artists, and voices of the future in regards to how we can continue the conversation, continue our craft, and in the most effective ways? I know this is kind of related to the other question as well, but just something more direct to those.
Sure. Yeah, and again, thank everybody for coming. I'd love to hear any questions that y'all have too. I would say get involved locally where you're at. If there's things that are going on locally, just stay aware of those things. Secondly, stay connected with SMS Novel. You know, even though activism isn't our focus, we do have some stuff going on. So just being part of these calls, hopefully you'll enjoy that, and we'll keep you updated on other events. So just staying connected with us. We'll try to get you connected as well.
That's perfect. And yeah, that kind of concludes my own questions. So if anyone else would like to speak on any questions or any concerns to our author that we have here, please do. Or please feel welcome to, rather.
I guess I could go.
Please do.
So first of all, I really admire that you're writing a book. I think that having some balanced media depicting the situation is really the key to changing people's minds. And there's definitely not enough of it right now. And that actually leads me to my question. As I mentioned to London, did I get the name right?
Yes.
So I've sort of avoided politics for most of my life. I grew up with Asperger's, and I could always see, you know, all the sides of the situation and be emotionally detached from them. But the problem is I had no understanding of empathy. So I would kind of just piss off people on all sides of any issue, and it wouldn't exactly be productive. But recently I realized that, you know, I've learned a lot about empathy the last 10 years, and there are definitely things about the movement which I've noticed, and I don't really see a lot of these ideas being said out loud. So I started writing an article which started getting quite long. It might even turn it into a book, kind of outlining my experience as, well, first of all, a white male, and second of all, you know, someone with Asperger's with this kind of unique view on the situation. Of course, you know, the main reason why I
so totally for the sake of time, I got to ask you, is there a question about the book process or anything?
Yes.
So others can ask? Okay, go ahead.
My question is, you know, as an author, how do you approach saying hard truths while balancing it with not offending or triggering people too much?
Very good question. The way that you balance is that you can't balance it. You have to make a choice whether to offend or not. Now, I tried to balance it. You know what usually that's called as a writer? Writing under a ghostwriter or a pen name or a false name, which a lot of people do. But to be honest, if you really want to take a stand for something, you have to put your name behind it. And so the balance is you're going to lose something. You may lose some friends, you may lose whatever. But if it's your truth, it needs to be heard. And if it's truth, it actually will help somebody. And if you don't get it out, you're actually hurting because you're not helping. So yeah, you have to make a choice to go all in or go all out.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I know I'm going to lose a lot of friends over this, but I suppose the question is, I know just from my childhood that, just straight up saying what's on your mind, it's not exactly effective. You need to include, a certain amount of empathy and a certain amount of understanding. What have you used to?
That's a good point. So you're right. Being able to have experience along with writing, that is helpful. I mean, to be able to feel and understand the suffering of others, that will give you a greater capacity to write about suffering and also to speak boldly against those who are causing the suffering. It's hard to say stop doing trafficking if you haven't experienced the horror of what trafficking is. So again, yeah, you're right. When you experience something, the empathy will come. But again, whether you're the beginning stage or the latter stage, just making the choice to stand for truth. That's I think that's an important thing. Thank you totally for that question.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions for our author today? Oh, sorry, Laura, was that a hand up or no?
Kind of, yes. I was wondering, like, before you wrote this book, did you talk to the families of, like, George Floyd and Natasha, and I forgot her last name. I'm sorry, it starts with an L, but
no,
like,
no, no, not at all.
I would imagine they would have, been happy to have the story told. It needs to be. But I'm just wondering if there was anyone like in the family who thought, no, it's too soon or anything like that, because it's such a sensitive thing. And I don't think there's any way to write about it without offending people. It is an offensive topic because it's something that our country refuses to address, really. I mean, except for people who are advocates, it just seems like a lot of people are just like, it's in the past. We have affirmative action. They just see things as Band-Aids as the solution. And yeah, I just feel like there's just so much resistance by some people, and it's almost like the entire history of the United States will collapse, like, to some people, like, if they really realize the impacts of discrimination and systemic oppression, they'll be like, this needs to change. And I think people are afraid of that. That's terrifying. It's a different mindset. We've been told a pack of lies as far as what's happened.
Yeah, what I would, thank you for that. What I would say, so my expertise, personally, my expertise has been in theology. That's been my expertise. So basically 10 years of postgraduate for theology. I like to joke with people and tell them I went to school 8 years just to tell people Jesus loves you. But so yeah, so spending all this time in these deep philosophical, theological doctrines and imaginations, if you import that into a story, you'll see a couple things. Number one, the basis for every good story is a story of good versus evil. Every one of your favorite stories is good versus evil. So there's something divine about it. And then secondly, when you import theology into a story, a fictional story, if it's done well, it creates imagination. It makes you wonder, like, I wonder what this is like, or that is like, or is this true? The ultimate imagination is not what death is like. The ultimate imagination is two things. Number one, what does racial justice look like in eternity? And the second question is, who is racial justice? And that's the deeper question. So I wanted to try my best to kind of import my expertise. If I was a fisherman, I would have talked about fish in the story. But I tried to import kind of my expertise into the story and to try to create imagination based on it. But yes, I do imagine a world where we see no longer racial injustice. I do imagine a world in which we see eternal justice eternalized. And I do imagine a world in which we see eternal justice personified.
Thank you again for that question, Laura, and thank you for your answer again. Peter, do you have any last minute questions And if you do not, does anyone else have any last minute questions?
I guess my general question is the overview of these meetings. It's going to be so I guess it's the focus of his book. Is that right? And because I don't have the books. I don't know moving forward. I just want, see what expectations are as we, continue to gather to discuss.
I'm not sure if I got all of what you were saying out because it kind of broke up a little bit. But yes, the Zoom book study will be surrounded around his book, which is, if I'm not mistaken, you can look on SMS Novel's website and go on there to get the book, which shouldn't be too inaccessible. And if any problems do arise, you can definitely email us at any time and we can make something work. And so pretty much, Mondays, Wednesdays, Saturdays, we will be reviewing the same sections for each meeting for 1 week, and it'll be a 4-week process. So we'll be going throughout the readings and really just kind of solidifying our understanding on racial justice and race relations and things like that, and going within the book, but also hopefully extending beyond the book and really just applying it to our own lives and taking what serves us and taking what resonates with us and leaving what doesn't too much. But hopefully it'll help you just get those gears running and whatnot. But thank you. That's a great question, just so everyone can make sure they're up to date on what's going on going forward. And so we can have a seamless book study going forward. And regardless of it might be days where you might not have gotten through the reading and whatnot, but please feel welcome to still come regardless. And hopefully the context that we kind of get through the question and answers will help just get your mind thinking and have something to look forward to after the meeting. So no problems if you don't have the book now or didn't do the reading in any future meetings. So but you guys have been amazing to be my first Zoom book study that I've ever done, especially
wow, yay!
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was very nerve-wracking preparing for this, but you guys have been awesome and just actually helping me just run this. Just the participation is definitely very helpful because I know it can be a little bit difficult and awkward talking in front of random people. I'll be the one to tell you that for sure. But y'all have been awesome, and you guys' insights are amazing and something that I even want to take with me. And also totally, I know you mentioned the writing of the article, so I would love to actually read that and see what further insight that you have to bring to the table for sure, and give my honest opinion on it. And I think just making sure to keep these conversations going, and any works of art you guys make or anything that you guys resonate with on your day-to-day, and how can you apply it to this greater social movement, or who can you tell about it, and just realizing your impact doesn't have to be super significant or super overt. You can just make sure you're talking to your family or your the people you work with, and asking them, hey, have you heard about X, Y, and Z? What are your thoughts on it? Let me, try to get you updated and hip about the empathy part of it, because I think so often, we do kind of view it from an observational aspect, whereas these are people who are living in these realities, and just being mindful of that going forward. But I think the author, his Zoom thingamajig probably, well, I'm not exactly sure, but he kind of disappeared in the middle of that one question. But this pretty much wraps up today's meeting. This has been an awesome July 6th. And if you guys have any questions or concerns, please let me know now. But you're allowed to leave out whenever you're ready.
Awesome. Yeah. London. Thank you, for organizing this. Really nice job. Thank you.
Appreciate it. I appreciate y'all all for coming. Hopefully I get to see y'all next week. If not, throughout this week. So that'll be awesome to regroup and catch up. So
awesome.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great rest of the evening.
You as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.